Yeah, maybe 491, 487. Hey. No, not yet. We're getting there. Let's just keep it up. So probably going to spend a little bit of time looking at other setups like this, see if I can use that method. I don't particularly think we're going to go over 503 right now, and the more I stare at this, the more I kind of think that we didn't even really check it, because even though it was like a penny off, I don't think this looks very different from what we saw on these other tops. So it could be that that same kind of idea here of like, where are we chopping? I think we had the right idea, and I think we have the right idea of targets. I would say there's like two down here. One's like 491, the other's 47. So because they're both like but both possible. One of them like a simpler retracement. So if it hits 503 and rejects, which seems likely, so it seems like we're seeing the same 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 kind of thing. It's doing what it needs to do. The 2 is kind of setting up as the breakout one. So this 2 is the breakout, and this 2 is the breakout. So I think it's going to go up to 501, or 503, but I think it's going to reject. If it doesn't reject, then it's an early change of character. So yeah. So somebody was asking me earlier about joining the Discord group, and I can give you a link, but you have to message me and let me know who you are, because I get people from random spots here and there. There's still a 2-cent gap down here from this morning. Yeah. I don't think it's out of the question that it drops lower, and considering where we are in the scheme of things, it would just be probably like an 854 or something. It looks low. Yeah, it's just an 854 retracement. So down to like 482. Those are the targets that I'd be looking for on drops here. I would be a bit surprised if it advanced early. So my expectation is that you're going to get a creek cross here. This is a very micro kind of thing. So it's not not a huge deal. It kind of looks like the 1 2 3 already happened. It's weird, isn't it? It's so weird looking at that and looking at this, and it's so obviously like the same thing. Isn't that bizarre? I think that's really bizarre. I mean, just look at it. It's like so weird to see that. It could be I just got the number wrong. Maybe it's not the high part here. Maybe it's the low. Oh, yeah, I could have just got it wrong. It could have been 502. So 1 2 3, it's just a double top. So you should see some kind of a retracement. I wish there was an easy way to determine where these are, but they're really inconsistent lately. I suppose the best way to do it would be to just look at I mean, 482 makes sense, 487 makes sense, either one, 491, all these make sense to me. So 482 with that little gap, like someone mentioned, that would make sense. Mason Blue 2 mentioned it, and I think that's probable. It wouldn't be like a huge deal if it came down again. And the volume here is just shriveling up ever since this one. The whole thing just looks like dropping consistently. So very much like a repetition of pattern. Nothing likely going to happen right here, but it is important to note that this is kind of making secondary moves here that are amplitude wise pretty high. Like we didn't see anything like that on these other tops. It's very minor, but it's just something I'll take note of. So I think this is done. I mean, it looks like the 1, 2, 3 already happened. It's basically like that second one is like a really high creek jump. So it like jumps the creek and it comes up higher, and then it comes way back down, jumps the creek, comes up higher, comes way back down. It's basically throwbacks, full throwbacks, and then it advances one more time until it exhausts. So I suspect it's already happened on this like micro level. That's what it looks like. I mean, it's close enough. I don't know. So I think it's already happened. So my expectation right now is down into close here, or kind of chop right around 496 or something. I would be a little bit surprised if it continued up. So a couple pieces of good news here. It's two changes in this little thing. One is the second advancement did not go higher, if that is the second advancement and I've got it right. That's good, because this is basically like a UTAD, like up thrust after distribution, right? I mean, essentially, it's just like a bear flag top. So this one did not go higher than the previous, and in addition to that, this met the previous top. So already in this very, very small, tiny micro range down here, you're seeing like a difference in the setup. Now, after that point, I probably wouldn't try too hard to do any kind of like Wyckoff down here, because I don't even know if it's finished yet. Maybe I misjudged this and it's, I don't know, this is the second one and it's still going to come higher. So just kind of watch it. But I probably wouldn't bother to do any kind of Wyckoff stuff on this. Not yet. It's too small, and Wyckoff isn't the most reliable on small time frames because institutions don't really trade small time frames. Like, that's not their concern. So it's all purely like just working out as iterative math and stuff. So this actually gives me a little bit of a picture into where it went, this one. So maybe I can do something like that. I'd have to get real low time frame, as I can't see jack diddly squat right now. So on the 1 minute, this looks like a mess. I can't see anything. You guys are like, this is not helpful. No, it's not. Not really. We can use lines on 1 minute. It might be more helpful. There's an M cross right there. It's just hard to see stuff. So maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe these guys are kind of pointing the way. Trying to identify where that jump is. It's here. That's where it actually got support though, right there. And then this got support here. Yeah, I don't know. nothing really standing out as an obvious target. It's just so, it's too small. It's just too difficult to, I guess, to identify. I mean, that's 487, so that was one of the targets. So, I mean, maybe that seems right. That's kind of where it's aiming. That's all. So I would say that's probable. And the rest of this, I think, is just chop before a breakdown, just being straightforward about it. I don't think it's going to run, but I mean, if I'm wrong, then it's a change of character, and that's positive. So there's nothing like bad about it if it runs. It's okay. I would just be like, all right, cool. And then I'd also be hesitant because I'm like wondering if this is so small. You can do the best you can to sequence something, but once it gets really tiny, you're just kind of guessing as best you can. I mean, I'm just being honest, because there's not really any way to to be positive that I got this right. This is 1, 2, 3, but I don't know. Maybe this is just the first move here, and then this is 2. It wouldn't not make sense. It's just, so I'm gonna watch. If it comes up to 504 and then dumps back through this creek, that to me is going to be number 3. So I'll use that as a measure for number 3, because then it should distribute down, and we'll find out. So if it hits like 503 and then drops through 498, we'll know. And if it does advance here, then probably a pretty significant change of character. So pushing above 503 with support would be a big deal. Man, MPW was just the full comeback today, all the way back to positive percentages. Just wild. I mean, I don't know what the future holds, but what a crazy move. Just a massive move. It reminded me of that AMC move when it dropped like 10% and recovered above the support like all in one day. So now MPW is joining the club because it's doing the same thing, you know, with this kind of stuff. And I find that to be interesting. I don't know why we didn't see it earlier. Like Monday, wasn't Monday the day? Yeah, Monday was the day that AMC dropped. I thought it already had a drop though. No, not really. I mean, it did drop low, but this is definitely like a bigger one. It's more in line with what we saw in like AMC and GME and stuff. Just massive swing. I mean, I'm happy with it pumping. I don't know yet. It's got to find support. It's easy to see it as a potential spring action. It came back above the breakouts. That's nice. I'm not going to complain. I just don't know, you know. It's like sitting right up on the mark, so maybe it's good, like maybe it's fine. I really wanted it above 467. That's that entry support. I think that's the big one that we're going to take off from. It's my best estimation for like the final support down here. So if that was a flush and an attempt to drive out anybody who's, you know, got stop losses and junk, that would be very efficient as a flush. But you can't really tell until it finds support and then starts moving back up, unfortunately. In this case, it's not really clear to me. So lots to go through on this, and still a lot of ways to go. But it looks positive, so I guess that's good. I didn't really look at IWM at all during the break. I was watching the bronze finals for the Taekwondo Olympics, and so I really wasn't over here like messing around with stuff. While you guys were on break, I was on break. Still got a gap below. don't think that head and shoulder is a big threat right now, although the volume has been pretty weirdly low on this chop. Just very bizarre looking volume profile. Don't really like the idea of leaving the gap here, just like we left a gap here before. It's like, why, you know? Maybe again, this is like a Friday action thing where you're going to see some kind of a build out. I wouldn't know how to work this out into what we discovered earlier on AMC. I don't think is it super bullish to have low volume? So that's a double-edged sword. I'm going to explain it, and I hope you understand like that the answer is both, because it just depends on the context. Low volume is really bullish coming out of a spring if you have high volume into the spring and it manages to recapture that support. So when that happens, yes, it is an indication, as Dave said, that your sellers are kind of missing. And there's an effort versus reward kind of principle in the market, where if you're making great strides on pretty low volume, then your effort is very low, your reward's very high. That's very good sign for whatever direction you're going. If you're pushing up here and the volume's like cataclysmically high while you're trying to push, that could indicate there's a huge amount of effort and they're being stopped. It's being absorbed. Buying's being absorbed by sellers, right? In the case of an upside, or selling's being absorbed by buyers in the case of a downside. So yes, that's an example of like where it could be bullish. So for springs, I talk about it a little bit like this. You want to see a high volume sell-off into a spring motion of flush. We did get that. It's typically followed by a pretty light reaction that walks back up like over a support. And then once that's done, then you see like a heavy buy-in. So this is like the summary of that statement that I just made. So you'd see like high volume here, but it'd be selling volume, and then you see high volume here and it would be buying volume. But the volume in the middle is actually pretty low, like it's pretty low volume. That's bullish. So if that's what's happening, then the way you would qualify that is you would look at it as but there's going to be a danger spot, and I'll tell you what it is in a second. The way you would look at that is that you basically have recaptured the bottom, whatever the bottom might be. I think it's pretty evident based on these two little wicks right here that the bottom is indeed 207.26. So I'm still thinking right now, even though we're climbing, I'm actually still thinking we haven't actually recaptured what we're intending to recapture here, which is this. Previously, this was a supply zone. This has to be proven as a demand zone. It's really only been a demand zone once in like the past like 2 years. That's a long time. So it may be like that you think that this is somehow like a given, but it's not a given. It has to be taken back. So because it dumped beneath it, the assumption is that, well, now it's going to act as supply. So you have to then take it back to demand side. So the way I imagined it was coming up to about 212. Maybe it only has like 211, and then you come back to 207. So these levels are really, really important to recapture. And you can assume nothing, right, until you see that. So even if you're feeling okay about the light volume, which is fine, the light volume needs to pick it back up above this floor. That's the nature of the spring. And if you don't have that, then the spring is not necessarily a spring. So here's the flip side to this argument about low volume. It's called an LSPY. So in an LSPY, let's pretend like this pink level is the floor. In an LSPY, you get a high volume sell-off followed by a very relatively low volume chop. this ends up looking like a bear flag. A bear flag is historically fairly low in volume, fairly even and low in volume, moving opposite direction of the trend. Same with a bull flag, fairly even low, in volume. So that's why when you get to that point where if we have like a bull flag, you're going to want to see the volume kind of drop off a cliff and then buyers pick it back up. It's the same thing there. So right now, according to our chart, you're fine, Avila, but I can't promise anything. I think they're going to hit like crazy next week, but I also would be like pretty lost if they didn't, and I wouldn't really be able to give you an answer except for maybe downside at this point, because I wouldn't know what's going on. Like everything we talked about today was very concise mathematically in terms of like timing and stuff. And I don't really have a lot of leeway. There's not really any leeway. It should be finished by tomorrow. So that's the TA as I have it. I would have to find something brand new, and I can't do that right now, and I'm not going to. So it's like, what I mean is that the timing is the timing. So for AMC, it's done tomorrow. Should be moving next week. The iterations are done tomorrow. You're going to move no matter what. If it moves down, it moves down, I think that it's going to go up violently. I think the targets are in place to at least squeeze up to 830, and then we'll see if we can get the double and go all the way up to 14 and 13. That's my plan. But it should happen pretty fast, market-wide. I think you're going to see a pretty decent squeeze motion here. Some people are talking about dumps and other things. I know that there's this carry trade, and I looked into it a little bit. And I'm not going to be able to be an expert on it overnight, so don't expect that. I understand where folks are coming from, though, and the idea that there could be like an inverse reaction in small caps due to rate cuts or whatever. I don't know. Unemployment numbers, and somebody posted it in the Discord, but unemployment numbers came back better than expected, reported, for the month. So that's kind of contrary to what happened in that employment report. So I'm not really sure if that matters, but it is a catalyst for bullish action potentially. So here's what I was saying about this spring, just going back to it, is I was just answering that question about the calls. This particular setup, BOJ said they weren't raising rates of Japan. Yeah. So it's catch-22. So like, is low volume always bullish? No. Sometimes low volume is bearish. And one thing that is difficult with anything really in the market, but especially with stuff like Wyckoff or whatever, is that you have to put it into context in order to use volume as an indicator. And if you don't put it into context, you could be like completely wrong, like exactly opposite wrong. Because an LSPY, if you don't have the right context, an LSPY like this may appear to you to just be a spring, and vice versa. A spring might seem to be an LSPY. You think the range is distributive and it drops down like this. They're really similar, they are, in terms of like what you visually might see. So it's very, very important for me as a trader to look at this and say, look, I will definitely agree that this could be very bullish because the effort is very light and the reward is very great. You want that kind of float coming out of like a sort of a flush action. But no, I'm not comfortable saying that right this second because I don't see it recapturing this top. It's still stuck underneath it. Once we get above, if and when we get above 212, and we came back to 207 and tested it, and that could be as early as Monday, for all we know, if that happened, then yeah, I'd be really bullish. I mean, for all we know, this could be like an SOS motion Monday and then Tuesday for AMC, right? And then Tuesday, this could just basically go back for gap fills. And then essentially that's it. You know, it could be that steep. Like, all right, it came back, checked it, and it's leaving. We don't know that for sure. That's just, I mean, that's TA. It's speculation with estimations. And so I will not be overly bullish on IWM until I see an advancement here that then touches 207 and then pushes out. Otherwise, this is still kind of on the maybe category. And I'm missing what I think needs to happen here is like a drop. It doesn't look very strong to me. And I think the same for AMC. It's kind of like when you see this kind of floating liquidity, I want to just see it quickly like tap down and then run. I like that kind of motion. I don't really like the floating liquidity with an extended push, especially if some of your indicators are overblown. These ones are not bad, so this doesn't really apply right this second. But sometimes that happens where it's like super low volume is trying to push up and the volume is dying, and it's already overblown. I mean, that's a bad sign. That's like low volume into a top kind of. That's like what happened back here. You can see that volume just dropping like a rock, and yet the price is trying to like make new highs, you know, in a very distributive way. And you don't really see the reaction to that until the very, very end. You don't see that high volume peak. That's distributive. You know, this volume was weak and trying to push up, but it's ultimately, it depends on what happens. It didn't hold the support. It's not bullish. That was a sign of bullish weakness, you know. So, you know, generally speaking, I think ascending on low volume on the whole, I don't typically think that's bullish. If the volume is dropping while you're going up, that's not typically bullish. But in the case of a spring, that does happen. You will get a very light volume reaction, and it'll kind of float almost back above the top and then hold. That's my analysis of it in terms of volume as an indicator. I don't see it as a problem right now because we're going into a Friday. I don't really see the low volume as a real big concern. I don't think it's a big issue. Based on everything, the way everything's setting up, I think we're just positioning. So that doesn't, so like I said all that, and then I'm like, it's not really a big deal. And that's kind of where I would leave it at. I'm like, Like, I would not be surprised if this came back to 202.50 before trying to advance. Like, that would not surprise me. Okay, you know, like, all right, it's created a topping action here then, and then you could basically have a range build out that advances as soon as it's done with that pullback, you know. I think what's typically a lot stronger in these instances is to see that high volume bottom appear, usually right on the top of a support, and then advance on fairly even to low volume. Just kind of chop your way all the way back up to the top. That's normal for like an SOS move. So man, GME, telling you, it's looking good on the whole. Same story as what I'm saying on the others. It's kind of like there's clear deviation here on this top, and there was here as well on the 6 minute. It's not. It's just there. It doesn't have to be that this turns around. Maybe higher time frames don't have that. But typically if I see that and dropping volume, I just think, well, what's most likely here? It's either one of two things, right? This is what we were talking about earlier today. It's either that you're about to have a retracement or you're about to have an S-curve. And we've talked about this so much over the last couple of days. I'm sure you guys are sick and tired of it, but you know, the S-curve does have low volume in the middle. We don't usually see it with this elevation. It happens. It does happen. You can go back and find examples like that are like this, where it just goes up after a break. I just have to kind of default to like generic pattern analysis mode when I see stuff like this and just say, okay, well, what would I normally do if I just approached this without knowing anything? Would I assume that this is going to go up or down? I'd probably think it's like more likely to have a pullback. So that way, at least I'm looking for it, and like I know where it's going to be. It's going to be here. See this creek cross? Then I'm not like overthinking it. I'm just like, okay, well, if it comes back down beneath 2160, it's probably going to dump backwards because there's a divergence on these two tops. So that would indicate, and the volume is coming down, that would indicate a directional change is probable. So it just depends. If bears take it, they push down. And this is okay because this is the first time we've approached this middle creek. You know, like the first time we approached this creek, we rejected. So it's not a weird thing to think like 1, 2, right? We were talking about this earlier, that M cross. Like here's 1, 2, and then here's 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not that weird to think like this could have a pullback and then lay up again, you know. This sort of falls in line with what we were looking at as well, just a bit on AMC. So I will be pleasantly surprised if this goes up right now. I wouldn't be mad about it. I would just be like, oh, okay, we're going there, I guess. You know, that's more of like an operator's game, like to screw over people that are looking like me, that are looking at those patterns and looking at those indicators. But I wouldn't normally expect that. So here I would be expecting maybe a retracement back down to like 2120 and then, or something like that. And then a build out tomorrow. And this would be like probably because you see how low it came. If this is the one that is low, you might even expect there to be a secondary one here on Friday. And it may end up still being high on Friday, like a bullish move Friday that goes way up here. And then maybe, maybe that sets up for that Monday move, either on this creek, something like that. So a big wave, and then, or above it. Maybe we're fortunate enough to see it come back down on top. If we land, guys, if we're at 22.32 on Friday into close, that's just golden. Especially if we came above it, if we did that. Because then we're back inside the bottom. I mean, you couldn't get any better than that in some ways. I just don't know if they're going to give it to us, you know. I'd be surprised if they just gave it to us. Like, that's almost too obvious. So when are you entering calls? I mean, I'm already in long-term calls. So if this doesn't break down, I guess, you know, whenever. I mean, if it doesn't break down, now would be fine. It's probably going to be pretty dead. Because tomorrow, if you're planning on chopping here, tomorrow you're probably going to end at the same price. So nothing's really going to change very much. They'll pump it and then squash them. So you get a little pump out of calls and then they'll squash them. And they might come down like a few pennies lower or something if they're shorter term. Max Payne's 22 anyways. Yeah, I could see that. Again, like Max Payne is always one of those things that you just kind of take it as it comes. Like, I'd be really happy if this went up and went ahead and made this move without the drop, just like AMC. But I don't necessarily expect it to be that easy. So we will see. We'll see what happens. 503, same deal. Nothing's really changed here. If you're just joining, you're a little late coming back, that's fine. Nothing really changed here. We're just waiting to see what happens. Last 15 minutes of the day, pumping up into 503. Who knows? Are we going to gap up tomorrow and have some kind of crazy Friday? Everybody can wish. You know what I mean? Like, it could happen. It wouldn't be like we were unprepared, but I wouldn't get too nervous about this. You know, if you're looking at short-term stuff, now's a good time to look at that. If you're bullish, you're bullish. So you invest bullish. Maybe you have a hedge or something so that if it drops below 482 and hooks, you're ready to go. But I don't know, man. Part of me thinks this is just like a little head fake. I don't feel like it's there yet. who knows? If it head fakes into the close, I think we could easily see it kind of do this, just kind of drop, crash tomorrow, and then work its way back up tomorrow. And then you'd see like maybe more definite advancement, I suppose is the right word, by close tomorrow. So this would not surprise me at all to see like another iteration. So we're at 502 right now. Yeah, so if that's the case, it'd be like right here. Something like that. Maybe we go a little lower. Maybe 482. The biggest change right now would be a jump here. That would be a pretty significant change of character. If we advanced up high to this one instead of this one, that would be really significant. Potentially. And then in which case, I might think we just don't ever come back to that gap. It's just another one on the chart. I've been in these situations before and just had complete and total misreads on how high or how low it goes. Like I'm just not sure about the extremes, you know, and then I'll pick something conservative and then it'll dump low, and then I'll pick something extreme and it won't go low. And I'm just kind of sitting here rolling my eyes like, well, whatever, you know. So I don't know. I know the levels are usually fine, the levels I pick. I usually have a couple in my pocket that are pretty good, that I'm pretty sure about. But like the only thing I know here is this is iterative and it has not yet changed. And so unless it comes over 503, I think we're still going to see another drop. Like this is a fake ascension, almost like these guys. And it's already changed a little bit. I mentioned earlier, this one only came to like 501. So it didn't actually, unlike previous multiple times that we've had this, the second move didn't actually come up above the first, which is kind of interesting. And then the third move only came up to the top of the first move. So it's already a little different. That's a positive sign. It's not doing exactly the same thing. My issue with any kind of tracking is that it's so small. It's too easy to be wrong, you know, and to like think that this has to be 1, 2, 3 where these ones are 1, 2, 3. It just doesn't have to be. It'd be really easy to be just completely off. Oh, we hit 504, so it pushed up at least a penny above 503 here. So it did advance. So maybe this is going to be a change of character right away. Volume picked up as well on that spike. So if it knocks it back down, no change. It's just a wick above. But if we see continuation here, like I'm pretty bullish about a change of character, because I don't think that's in the right spot. Like I think it would be stopping right now. The only other place I see a hook is 509. It's the only other place locally I could see like head fake going to. Everything else looks lower. So we will see. Serbia is whooping Team USA in basketball? No. That's okay. Humble pie, I guess. I don't know why I have that on there twice. So yeah, this is a moment of truth. This could be your... So what was that AMC earlier today? This was the buy-in. This is the quote-unquote S-curve that just doesn't want to finish. And we keep seeing it try and it fails. So I'm still really hesitant because I'm watching this and I'm like, look, man, it just found support right there. I mean, we're looking at a really tiny kind of time frame here. And it found support right there at 499. And it hit this low at 482, which in theory, like that's the mid ground. I mean, we've talked about it for 2 months I've said that we're gonna, when we take off, we're gonna. I was like, I bet you guys money when we take off, we're gonna touch 485 right before we do it. Either way, and that's been the case. So, I'm like looking at it like maybe that's a decent volume coming in. Is it just go ahead and start the S curves? Could be, or it could be a head fake. You guys are like, well, that's not helpful. I can't tell you because it has to find support. It has to come back to like this 503 and like build out a support and then go, And if it just goes like this into close, it's anyone's guess. It could be just gapping up, tomorrow to near, to near this number, or like gapping up here and then chopping down and then going back up. I mean, there's just so many things. It's not even really worth speculating. I could find 24 paths to the same end. So yeah, it crossed 505. So anyways, we'll find out. You said it was a change character. Yes. Yep, to the best of my ability, that is the place where I was expecting it to stop. So that means it's changing, right? Probably. If it advanced past it. Is the timing wrong? I don't know. Like I said, you guys, it's like one of two things. It's either this is where you're going to be on that time on Friday, or this is where it's going to stop that time on Friday. This is a pretty huge volume bar right there. So if it does slide back down, it's going to be kind of nasty. But I don't think we're going to go that low, even if it comes back. So I don't know. I hate this kind of, I really don't like this kind of price action. I really don't like the end of the day, the last 8 minutes, it spikes. You're a liar, Booksy. You said that when it got over 503, you'd be going nuts. Well, what I meant by that is it pushes above and finds support over 503. We've seen a lot of head fakes in our day, so I don't want to assume it's going when it could just dump in the last 2 minutes, and then tomorrow we're back down to the 480s. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I don't think I would hope, I don't want to listen to a guy that's saying like, hey, buy, here we go. Yeah, we're going, woo, yeah, woo. If that's your thing, like, that's cool. I'm probably not going to ever do that. I'll get excited about cool things, discoveries, and I'll get excited if I see that support and then the continuation. I'll get excited if it gets to that target. But I want to see that support. So we came back down. We're now at 503. It needs to build support here. And if it just dumps 503, I think it's just that I misjudged where we were. Like, I mean, it's that simple. We probably just sell back through. So we'll watch. It's at 502. It's about as low as I want to go. That's where the previous tops were. Technically, if it's an SOS with a backup, it could come all the way back down to 5 and still be possibly in contention for like an advancement. Dang, they're going to end it at 5 probably. Ugh, gross. You got to understand, like, when you're looking for something and you're wanting a breakout, you want to see a decent volume pickup, but you do not want a high volume pickup into a top. You just don't want that. So right now, this is a 6-minute chart. If I go back and look at the 15-minute, will I just see like a big red wicked candle? You know what I mean? Like as the final. So it adds up. You have to just be careful being overzealous about a move up. Am I excited that it may have advanced just now? Sure, but I'm just going to wait. I'm genuinely kind of amazed at MPW's resilience in this drop after the earnings. There's a nice 1 hour divergence here, so that's positive, really positive. Potentially could just invert and go. GME is looking pretty good. I'm thinking the same thing as AMC. It kind of looked like it was a little overcooked. GME is a little different than AMC. Like I feel that there are times in GME where it respects a pennant, and I mean that's naturally what happened on the biggest picture. Is like there was a huge pennant. AMC has very rarely respected a pennant as a method of advancing. So it does it sometimes, but it's pretty rare. It's almost always a cat ear. So like I always like well, you know, maybe it'll go, maybe it won't. GME is a little different. So I'm looking at the RSI here, like raising my eyebrows, like, well, is it trying to hold that creek? And you know, all right, did that fix it? I think so. All right, that fixed it. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Dropped out. Yeah, AMC does respect. That's funny. Yeah, like so this is a tough one for me because I feel like they're purposely like creating they do this every single, who are we kidding? They do this every single day. It's like every single day there's a cliffhanger. You don't know what to expect on the next day. Because it could just be that GME is chopping here and RSI is chopping as well now. The divergence is really just to kind of keep it steady, and it's on a liquid center too, which is interesting. Because there's not that much trading here, but there's apparently a high amount of volume traded here from back on August 1st into 2nd. Like apparently, because you can see it on the VRVP. We barely traded there at all today. So that for whatever reason, that's a super high volume mark at 2180. We're kind of slightly below it. It's too close to tell. I'm sorry. It looks like it held on AMC. You see that wick backwards? Darn this chart. It's just going to do this, isn't it? It looks like it came back to 503 and it held. It got bought back up. So we're on to the next support, and there it is. That's the close. Wow. Pretty much perfect. This could have been so much easier for us. You guys are like, what? Is this good or bad, dude? I don't know. Then what good are you? I'm not good. You got to just unsubscribe, man. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's a 50-50 back up to 520s. So the real question we should be asking is, did we experience a change in characters? Did we experience a change? Did it do something different? And I think the answer is still yes, even if for whatever reason this drops back down, because this advancement is way stronger than the previous ones. I mean, it just is. It's almost 100% of that range here. So not even close to anything else we've seen. So we will see, but I think that on the whole, it's still positive. Like we still closed above it, above 503. I'm going to wait it out. I'll wait it out, see what happens in the morning. I'll try to be on a little early, but if it's not running like crazy, then just temper your expectations is all I'm saying. It did stop at a supply at a creek here. It's a very mild one by comparison to some of the others we've looked at. But it wouldn't be surprising to see this exact same price action like here, you know what I mean? This would be like pretty simple to do. I mean, you can see it visually. It would not be difficult to pull off the same kind of price action in the same kind of moment. So ain't over till it's over, as the saying goes. We don't know, it may be that it runs way up there. It may be that it's just chilling out and gets pinned. So there's nothing bad about this. It's just, it's unclear to me whether this is going to hold or if we're going to kind of drop back through. So I've got to be just as straightforward as I can. I just don't want to overhype something if I'm not positive. And right here, I'm just, that pump into close, I don't know. High volume, did close over, did touch 503. Very small time frame, but it did it. So I think I've just become so jaded by the dead at the end of the day up thrust kind of thing that just results in a flat out failure. So I'm going to be hesitant on it. Same with GME, man. It's just kind of like sitting right on that level. It still looks like it's possible it could drop. If it runs, it runs. I won't be angry. MPW just popped off at the end too, and it dropped right back down. It just may just be an end of the day buy-in from like ETFs and market accounts. Like, I don't know. I thought it was August. It was announced on August 8th or something, but I think it was released on August 22nd. 2 years ago or something. And then it existed for like a year. So it's not really moving. So I think we're going to just have to wait till pre-market. Unless there's some kind of news drop or something. Everything's just kind of sitting still here. What a weird day, huh? It's very close, guys. So one of the things I wanted to do before I logged off today was to try to test this. So if you're not really interested in seeing it, that's cool. But I need to back test it, and I figured I'd just do it. And I'll keep an eye on like prices, but it's after hours. SPY, casual $12 SPY day. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, well, some folks are. Some folks want to just kind of get on with their day. And it's okay. I don't take offense. I guess what I'm going to try to do is figure how to measure out the... I'm sure this one's going to be pretty easy. So I'm going to try to do the same thing I did here for that. It's a little tricky. I'm going to do it a little less scientifically though, probably just to save some time. I think the complicated nature is like where the heck is the middle? That's where this sort of breaks down. I had to use my, it's like the top of this marker right here, or the bottom of this first, this big push. Not the wave after. So I think it's this one. Bit slow. This is going to be difficult to do. This is a weird one. Because I know where I don't know if I'm able to find the next S-curve. So here's an example of one that may not work. Let's do the, you guys are like, why? What, giving up already? I just don't know what to use. I guess I'm not sure if this is part of it. Like, is this one of the iterations? It might be. Walk down? I think it is. I think it's like that shoulder. So it'd be like here to here. And then I got no clue. That one, I have no idea. This is not going to help you. So I'm thinking that's the same distance there. So it's really like a transference of that, and then I'm missing some, and I don't know if it's this other upthrust. There's like multiple ones right here. So you see here how we have them really separated? These are super compact. There's actually one right here, and then there's another one right next to it, and then there's another iteration down here. It's too small. Let me use the March example. I bet it's close, but I can't prove it, so I'm not gonna. I'd have to go in there and like measure every single one. Some ranges are going to be like that, so it's not like I shouldn't do it. And then we'll try it on something else. Let's try it on GME or like the original run-up or something. Well, the point of this is not to showboat at all when I'm looking at these things. And now I really want to just see that there is an actual pattern, and I'm not just blowing my steam, trying to find something that doesn't really exist. So I got to be careful. I mean, I already knew that this was there, so that's not unusual. But I'm trying to do is see if I can understand the nature of that momentum. And then where you would measure from in the grand scheme of that momentum. This is where things are going to get dicey. Like, how do you add together those values that are really small? Is this even an S-curve? It's an M-cross. So it should count as one. I think you have to count the spring value. It should be a little higher. You'd have to count it. And then I don't know what to make of this, if you should use this at all either. Here to here. And then where is the liquid center? That's the question, another big question. Because this measurement tool would require that you kind of move from, in theory, from like center. This moves right from 495. But that's because I assumed that the iterations were ending. It might be harder than I thought to do. We'll figure it out, I guess. Well, this is the LSPY before the final drop, so that makes it easy. It's right here. So it's somewhere around here, Yeah, Yeah, that makes sense. And then it just comes back above and it hits it. So you would add it to this value here, I think. This one. Because it's off the middle. At least that was on the first one. That's like almost dead center on that move. That's really strange. You can kind of ignore this line, but look at where it ended up. That move right there, that transference, like right there. So is that the remaining value then here? This is the remaining value? Yep. I guess it kind of makes sense because this S-curve incomplete, this one is like a wave. So it's like a rotational thing. And then there's that value. And then one more for the top. It's pretty close. And considering like I would have missed some iterations, this is pretty good. That's a pretty good estimation. So I don't think it's, maybe it's not going to be like hyper accurate, but that's pretty close. Pretty close. I don't think anyone would complain about that, would they? I mean, that's percentage-wise ridiculously close. So if you missed what I just did, it's just an idea about iterative moves and what we might expect. And you know what? I may have measured this one too far. So I don't want to cheat it. I did do the full move here. Well, but maybe should I have measured from the bottom? Yeah, because I measured from the bottom there. So it should have been like this move. Well, crap, man. Where would an S-curve be here? I don't know. It's somewhere between this one and this one. I'm trying to ignore this. This is just part of the backup for that move. What I did on the last one was I measured right up to that. It's probably about the same. So I'll leave it like that. So that's the same value. It's probably pretty close to the same. Yeah. So it's slightly below. That actually is a lot closer to intersecting the actual mark. You see that? So this one went above it, but I actually measured it wrong. And then this was this iteration. So we're just counting. And what I'm doing is I'm not measuring to peaks. I'm measuring to where I think the S-curve middle is. So you can see how that's like a support supply-demand zone. It's on top of it, then it's below it. This one's a little confusing. There's like multiple. I guess it could be here. So there's like the switch up. That changes it again. So see how I'm flip-flopping? This is going to take me some time. I'm going to have to practice it. This one's like that too. It's top and then it's top. And then this guy, the little one, is at the very, it's the very last one, and I'm not zooming way in, but I'm trying to see if I can understand it should go from the bottom to that, once again, that kind of peak here where it tops off, not the actual top, but where the support is. So those are the added values. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Does that mean it looks iterative the way I drew it? It's like blip, 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 coming down. So I think this is correct. So I'm going to go backwards again. You guys are like, well, you flip-flopped. Maybe it's just exactly like it was before. Actually, that's actually higher than it was before. Now it's probably going to be even more accurate. It's just P and F, I suppose. Point and figure charts. That's cool. Well, I'm glad I found a way to do it. Yeah. So that would have been like a few pennies off or something. That's pretty amazing. guess say what you got to say about it, but that's pretty amazing to me. Like, I'm just kind of dumbfounded, I suppose. Still, I don't really fully grasp this yet. I'm trying my best to understand it, but I think that at the end of the day, there's going to be a little bit of a hazy spot in explaining it, because like I know where it's coming from in my mind as like this outworking of a move that doesn't exist. You can even see that rising wedge there. It's the same deal, you know. It's like the outworking of a move that never happened. So it's a very strange thing to say, like somehow that adds into a, you know, a move later on is very bizarre. I think it's a weird thing to kind of to say out loud, even just like, oh, well, I think this moves into something else. You know what I mean? Like it's storing up in that low all of the information. It's like a black hole. It's like sucking in, going down, and storing all the data and information, and then the white hole is like releasing it. That's just wild. Wow. Yep. Measuring S-curves, huh? Now the big test. You know it's coming. You got to do it. If this works, it's going to be like one of those things that throws a lot of mud up into people's faces, because the concept of this being kind of a planned move has very much been on my mind for a while, and wondering if the move itself wasn't fabricated to some degree. So the challenge is going to be, where the heck is the LSPY? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, is it like, how do you measure this? Is it this? Maybe it's this right here, this guy. Maybe that one. So this is the chop, and I think it comes lower. It does like an ABC kind of thing. And I think it drops lower here, doesn't it? So this would be like the ultimate bottom. This is a weird looking part of the chart. Pretty sure. So the low here was 1057. And the low here was 1057. Well, that doesn't help. It's the same value. So it double bottomed. So what do you do about that, Booksy? I don't know. I have no idea. I guess I have no choice. I have to just assume it's this, though. Since this came back down and reset, it's like a shallow S-curve, but it didn't. It's missing like, this is like the M cross, but it's like missing like the lower low. It doesn't have one. So that's very different from the other two that we just looked at. Oh well. You can still do the measurement. I just don't know if I'm measuring from the right spot, if that makes sense. I may need to do this much bigger scale. Let's do it on like the daily. So where would you put an S-curve? That's the question. So if you get a little lost, it's how would I do an S-curve? Where would I place like the middle of it if I thought this was going to continue? I guess it'd be, yeah, right there, because this is kind of an easier way to do it, I suppose, is you're looking at the cross here, the cross up, because this would be like where it failed to advance and then it's coming back up. And normally, and it doesn't really matter timing perfect, because like normally in an S curve, you're going to exceed the top and then go back below it. So that, oh, you could maybe make that like an equal parts wrap around this instead. It's the same value, but you see what I mean? So it's like it's wrapping on some value. That's the middle. So I think that's the first value that's stored up. Then the second value, this one only has like 3 that are kind of obvious. This is that push, secondary move, push down. Yeesh. So let's try the same thing. Let's say it was going to advance. This is like a triple top. 1, 2, 3. So what is it, Booksy? Thought you said this was going to be easy, man. I didn't say it was going to be easy. I got to make sure I get it right. There's no point in doing this if I get it wrong. Well, the trend changes here, so maybe we should count the whole top instead, since that's where the breakdown is. This could be like a 1, 2, 3, and I was ignoring it before. This is gonna be tough. All right, so I'm gonna do 2 different data points here. I'm not really sure. So this makes sense to me because it's support and resistance. This makes sense because it's resistance and support. I just don't know which one to pick. So I'm kind of stuck on that. So this might be a harder one to do. You guys are like, shouldn't it be easy for you now? Yeah, I mean, kind of. Like, this could be thought of as like a double top with a backup and a secondary run. This could be thought of as like a double top with a backup and a secondary run, in which case I'm doing it right. But if I'm not doing it right, it's easy to see like how that could also be the value. And I just want to make sure I'm considering that. And then the last one, also difficult to do. But I think this one might be we'll just kind of keep it simple. Like, we'll keep it like right there. It's sort of like the chop between the two. And I'm going to leave it at that. All right, let's try it out. I'm just going to shrink them down so they're not. All right, don't shoot the messenger. I'd say that's pretty dang close. And if I use the shorter one, it doesn't look like it's going to be any better. Probably miss on the opposite side. But yeah, if you average the two, you would have gotten the price like perfectly. Take your swings, folks. Take your swings. This was definitely planned. At least where they pulled the plug. I'm not doing anything like crazy fancy. I'm just looking at that idea of iteration, like buy up, buy up, buy up, add the prices. I mean, we could keep going, I guess. Yeah, it makes sense too, because then when you look at this in retrospect at the cross here, it's like here and up. That's the move away from the creek. So it's the same value. It may not have gone as high as it could have gone. But they pulled the plug, so who cares? Like, we'll never know. It would have probably only gone up to like that marker, but it was really close. So I'm again pretty confident about that. Well, that's number 2. Let's try one more. You guys are like, I don't really care. This is the past, Booksy. Yeah, but you learn about it and then you figure out how to use that in the future, and it should be pretty valuable. This one's going to be a little different because this is like structurally kind of different looking. I think that for this one, what I want to do is just use the simplest like numbers I can here. So like this will be 1, and then 2, it's not even that different. I'm going to go to like the chop at the top. Since they're like pointed, I don't know what else to use. They're not really flat like these ones, so I don't have an easy like switch around. I do see it here and here, and I think right here. So I'm going to use the switch around on these. Where's the last one? Probably just the recovery here, back above that support. That's a harder one to do. I may have to go down in scale. I can't really see it. It's a little too wishy-washy the way I have it. I have to kind of guess. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to work it out. Time? Can you get time? Like timing? Yeah, I mean like, so on this one, if you were to measure from the bottom, you might get the wrong timing if you use the one I used. It just depends on what you use, you know. Probably would want to use this and then like the breakdown value here. It's easy in retrospect because you can just snap it to this and then look backwards. This really wouldn't have been very easy to find, would it? This breakdown value, it would have been difficult. Maybe this one, it's sort of like the second top right there. That seems possible. It's just a guess. But we already knew like this has a pretty clear and evident wave push up that measures out correctly. So 1, 2, so like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Probably right there. I'm going to probably change the colors on it a little bit, but we don't really need to, actually we don't really need to keep it together. We can just do it like its own thing. This is kind of challenging because I think in this one, the LPS is actually on the bottom. So what are we really measuring when we're measuring from? We're measuring from like when it crosses the creek. So there's an additional thing that's happening here that I didn't really say out loud. But this is really where it jumps the creek. So I'm talking about like this probably lining up with a creek jump, and that's what we're seeing in our current time frame, and that's what we saw here too. So like it's not just that they set up the entry on this like LPS business with the drop down. This ends up being where that creek cross is. So if you're talking about timing, there's another element of timing. This ends up being where that creek cross is. So there's both the horizontal level, which we would call like the center of the structure, and then that's established really early on, and then the creek itself, and those intersect at that point. That's where you cross and then you add. So the problem with this one, it's different in its build. It does not have, I think you just have to do it from where this wick starts, because it doesn't have a like an LPS kind of thing like down here that really adds up to it. It's like really low. It's like way down here. It doesn't really make sense. It could be this one when it first enters. So they use that to create that support. It ends up being this one, but it's a different setup. It may be better just to use creeks, you know, when in doubt. Just where does it jump the creek? Because I think that might be a better, it may be a better way to do it. Hard to say. Nope, that didn't work. Yeah, maybe there's a better way to do it, but I would probably do it from, this is going to be way off, actually. So here's another debate. This one's off. So if you wanted me to see one failed, I think this one's going to be right on the money. But here's another debate is what do you use for the slingshot? Because we're talking about that right now in our current time frame. And this is off. Did it give a target that is decent? Yeah, I mean, it gave a decent target, but it's not quite right. What is this target? I mean, it's definitely an important level. It's a whip around here. It's a 50-50 target, but it's not the high by any means. So where was that aiming? I wonder if it was all-time highs. Nope. It was not. It looks like this intersection, like it was aiming for this guy, doesn't it? I think that was probably the target. And then this is all like extension. And then that makes some sense as to why when you look at the resulting action, it just dumps right through it. And that resulting action is just a really fast turn around this target here. So this did not give us the high. So here's it breaking. Pretty darn close, but no cigar on that one for the top. Not at all like this. This one is just dead on, like right where it needs to be almost. This one instead gives you kind of that early whip target, and it's interesting. That's a really important target. You might even argue that the rest of this is just distribution through that, frankly. That's what it looks like. So even still, like in the midst of this bizarreness, it's still very, very, very important. I mean, it just is. That's a super important target. So it's pretty fascinating. This one's just built differently. It doesn't have, the iterations are like kind of ascending in a different triangular kind of pattern. So maybe if I added these guys, it would change, but I don't want to fudge it and just say like, oh, I'm going to add these two because it needed more volume. I mean, maybe that's an argument we could make, but I just feel like that's not very genuine, you know, so I'm not going to do that. Still, this is very, very interesting. This is what I'm wondering about where we are now too. It's like we were doing the same thing over here, and I was like, yeah, it kind of works perfectly, but it's like slightly low, you know. Like even when you add like all of them together back to zero, it's like it's at $12, you know what I mean? So it's interesting because you do like the 50-50 and it goes way high, you know, but you do just the zero value and it goes only up to $12.04, almost $12 exactly. And it probably is $12 exactly, like, because I think we're like 4 cents high here. This is like, yeah, I mean, this is like $4.95, so you could easily see how like, all right, well, you could squeeze a few pennies downward or something. That doesn't even really matter to me. $12 is $12, so I found it really interesting that this went up to basically 12. And we don't really need to know why that's important. We already know it's important. Maybe it's aiming for this. And it's using this as like because this was the support at 12.16. So maybe it's kind of aiming towards that mark And just like we see in maybe just like we see in that other example, that's not actually going to be the area that we hit and then just kind of sink. Maybe instead we get a reactive move that looks a lot like what we see in, that would make sense. And we get a reactive move that goes high and then like quickly tries to advance but fails, and then it drops back through, you know, and then you get a sort of a 50-50 swing around back to 1050. Oh yeah, that's good. So it does hit the target, but then it comes back down and gets squashed under 1380. So you hit 1475, then you get squashed under 1380. It's probably why it kept appearing on the chart, you know. That would be reasonable. None of this has happened. It's just hypothetical right now. But if it were to do the same thing, then you'd expect that to be like a whip around value. And really, at that point, you're just distributing underneath 12. So you just have like a normal distribution cat ear. And then it would break down here. It'd look like it's going to maybe run and then fail to advance. Something like that. Come October or something, going into November. And then probably from, I can't really be sure about this part because, well, no, you could probably be pretty sure about it, Booksy. There is a marker here between the two that shows up later. It's this guy. This is like a breakdown level from back here. It's from this setup, and it breaks down and hooks. So I think you could be pretty positive about it in some ways, that it's going to break down and hook underneath that trend that we're kind of staring at right now. Yeah, he says that. Apparently, he made like millions of dollars or something off my stuff. But he said that early on, and then he started doing weird things, and I don't know, just doing his own thing, which is fine. It's whatever. I stopped kind of agreeing with him on a lot of stuff. I mean, he also thought we were going to go to 190 back here right before we took off. I'm super mean about stuff like that, I know. I'm kind of a jerk. I mean, people can say the same thing about me. They can say, well, he thought we were going to go up to 14 and we only went to 11 and then it dumped. You know what I mean? Like, oh, fair enough. Yeah, but this measures out. I wouldn't say pre-planned in terms of like determinism. I think that if the market moves the way that it's expected to move in terms of like a structure, then the mathematical structure is there for it. It will embrace it, you know. Something weird about October 7th, because that came up on MPW as well. But anywho, this would imply that you're going to sort of chop down into, I don't want to make it like 1-to-1. I don't think it's going to be like exactly 1-to-1, but it may imply that you get kind of a secondary swing move just based on the way it's set up. Maybe in that November move. And this would be like the final one. That's as far as I take it. Because I think from that point forward, you'd have to see what's going to happen. Could be kind of different. But this would make sense. This is like a 50% retracement. And it's back to like that LSPY level. It's the same thing as the first one. We came back to the LSPY level here. Right here. And if you look at the big picture, you can see like that's where we had that big LSPY right here. Just to the side of that. So this was a way of distributing back through that support level that was acting as support, at least when it took off. So in theory, it pushes up here, it finds support at that LSPY level at like 650s or whatever, 8s right up here, 750, and then takes off, and we would end up back down there later to test it and potentially drive back through it. And I don't know what would happen at that point. Anyone's guess. But if I were betting that it was going to be similar, this is M shape 1, and then you're going to have a big, deep retracement. You guys are like, it's going to go back to all-time lows. It could. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but I think it would be like pretty simple to, at this point, to argue that maybe it does. It could advance right here. This is the second place you could have an advancement. It could just continue another wave. This is where we've failed in the other example, but it would just be like another cat ears basically if it fails, and then you'd have probably a huge, long, boring LSPY here. This is, now it's iterative. Now it's an iteration. So at that point, you guys are like, what? Iteration? Well, at that point, if it keeps doing the same thing and it's builds out the exact same way or nearly the same way, yeah, it's iterative, you know. Maybe then we could use some kind of the same methodology to measure out a move, but this is way too far in the future to be like absolutely certain about it. Lots of stuff could happen. And this is where you could have what we call a shallow S-curve right here. So this is where the S-curve is either full-fledged. So in theory, like this doesn't ever necessarily go back below, just saying it, this doesn't necessarily ever go back below 360s again. Because if we're right about the high, then the middle of the S-curve would be like here. And at the lowest, it would be here, which I guess would get you back to the 3s for the gap fill. I don't know. Something like that. So like during that time, you would have a pretty decent chance that you're never going to come back below 360. But at that point, it's kind of a toss-up because we'd have to see how it works. It'd be like this pocket if it broke down again. The good news is then you're in for another squeeze, you know. Then it just does it all over again. And you basically have like a new chance to, it probably would trade this. And you might be saying, hey man, this looks really different than the other one you drew early in the day. Not really. It's just an M shape and then it fails, but it could advance. The problem with it is you don't know, this is where things get kind of sticky, is like you're probably at this point looking at this kind of crazy mode of iterative moves down. And once you get to that point, it's like, well, how far does this thing have to go? Is it going to keep doing the same thing over and over? Maybe. But I'll tell you what, if it makes a higher high here, it's a change of character. So the next one, it's a very similar, now it's starting to look just like that old school fractal thing we use all the time. That should be apparent to everybody at this point. If you follow this channel, it should start looking like this guy. And then you finally have like a real cross, you know. And then all of a sudden it's like, there we go. Now you got all those little buy-ins that you can add up. Probably equals like the move back to the top. Looks right to me. Sure. Sure. Do it, Booksy. Add the values. I'm just guessing. I don't really know where it's going to stop at this point. I guess that would be the top. So that's the hook around value. So that's value number 1. It's already really high. Value number 2 would be the hook around value here. Value number 3. Am I measuring this right? Let me think real quick. Sell down, that's right. And then you buy up. You measure to the middle. One, two. And what I'm using is like the 1, 2. So 1, 2, 1, 2, breakdown values, the middle. Wait, why did I do it like that? I gotta make sure I get this right, guys. It's like, can't be wrong when I do it, so I gotta be really careful. What's this garbage? Get out of here. I must have pasted something. Why is that there and not here? I don't know, I moved it. Yeah, no, that's right. So it should go up to there. And then it's starting to look like it's just a massive version of the same. Push up, push up. So we're doing like this kind of garbage right now. We're pushing up to the creek. This actually comes lower, so there's that. That's not encouraging, I know. But I guess if it did do that, it'd be down here in like ones or something. Yeah, in that regard, that kind of implies that you would just continue through the bottom. You come back down to here. But this is gonna be a tough one because I don't know where to stop. There you go. I don't know. I don't know. There you go. 1100 or something. I mean, 1100 is a huge target. I don't know. I think the problem with this is like we'd have the second one, we'd have to have the third one, and in order to have the third one, you have to know how far down the second one's going to go. So you're kind of making assumptions about this one is easy if we do get to this mark. We know where it's going to stop. We're pretty sure it's going to wrap around 12. So 12 is the level you'd use. So basically from 238 to 12, that value's already there. So the first two are basically locked in. But the second one, or the last one, is not. That's this one right here. And that's the one that I'm not sure about. Because if it changes character, you may never go below this, gap. But if it doesn't change character, this could come like way down here. This could be that 14-1 prediction. I don't know why it would do that. It's just another way. Again, it's like iterations are iterations. Like we don't know exactly how it's going to pan out on the last one. Like the one we saw today, it didn't go anything. It didn't go down. So it's definitely not impossible that we could end up at like 160 or something. And then you have to ask the question like, okay, how fast does it go back up? So on and so forth. Does that add like a huge leg here? I don't know. We may know better at the end of this move because if it does come up to the top and this anchors around 12, that's pretty much on this previous bottom's takeoff zone. I mean, it is. So it's like right there. So if it anchors at 12, then the next one would anchor at that gap and drop below it proportionally. So it would lose the curve, the big curve. I mean, it's just theory at this point, but It's like the opposite of what everyone's expecting for elections. It's like it doesn't break out in December and then it just dumps. Really far. That's a massive sell down. I don't like that very much. But I suppose that's the way it would be if it were continuing to do the same thing over and over again. Seems a little bit crazy. It's really not that big of a deal on the big picture though. It's kind of like, yeah, that looks right. I mean, I'm just saying, it does. Kind of looks right to me. So if this thing goes to those kinds of lows, it's going to have a really strong reaction. It's going to look different. It's kind of like this one, you know? Like, it's probably going to look really different than the others. It's going to have like a quick... I think it'll change character pretty fast. I do. I don't think it's going to keep going down. It'll probably use this as support and then take off. Just like this did. And then it'll finally break this major creek. So let's try that instead. And let's see what that looks like. This is a little bonkers. This is just hypothetical, y'all. If y'all are like flipping out about it, that's really close to that value at 70. Yeah. I mean, that's super close. That's the channel down value. Wow. This would end up looking like a dead stock to so many people if that were the case. This is just hypothetical, guys. Don't be too antsy about it. Yeah, so the actual breakout value is not the original move. The original move is not the big breakout. It may seem like that, but I think this original move is taking you from the LSPY backwards to where that bottom is going to be. That's a big theory. But it also makes sense. Because it's the same wave distance. So I guess the question is, like, did we already do it? 67.38. Because, I mean, at this point, we could have already done it. That's creepy. That is almost exactly the value. That is really creepy. Creepy is a weird word to use, but very strange. That value right here is almost the exact value. If you use the time that I've got, and you go from that intersection, so it's a triangulation. I know it's a little confusing, watching these charts and looking at them, and you're like, dude, I can't see jack diddly squat on your chart. I get it. But this is pretty important, because if you look at a triangulation of where that LSPY is, it's kind of horizontal to where that parallel intersect. All right, nothing else. You're just looking at a triangulation of space. In theory, like, that would give you where you're going to hit. It should give you where that wave finishes in some regards. That doesn't guarantee you're ever going to make another low here. It doesn't say anything about that. It just says, like, hey, it should give you an idea of, like, that's roughly the right timing, and I think that's correct. So when I look at it, I'm like, I was like hesitant to be confident about it, but like that waveform, that is unusual, I suppose, is all I'm trying to say. That intersects, the offset here intersects that triangulation here, March 2026. That's a February 2026 date. I kept talking about that. It's like, it comes up in every single measurement I do. Sometime around February or March 2026, that measurement comes up. But if you measure in reverse from there, it takes you back to that 295, $3 level where the gap is. That cannot be, mathematically, that can't be a coincidence. It's just not. It cannot be a coincidence. That wouldn't make any sense, as a coincidence goes. So it doesn't really give you a perfect sense of timing, because what we're doing is talking about where it jumps the creek. But now I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, what's the probability that it continues to push? And then, like, how high could it actually go? I think this might give us a better idea, though we're not there yet, of how high that could actually go. And I'm starting to wonder if it's a matter of, like, does it iterate or not? Like, does the time build or not? There's going to be so many things I could do to test this. So if you're like looking at it right now, like with your eyes, like, what? Like, I don't get it. I should be able to test this on other time frames, but like right now, grand as it may be, it's just theoretical, because I don't have any kind of proof that that's what's going to happen. It looks like it's trying to build out a value to this, which is very, very high. And it would make sense if it took that long in a bot. It's like twice as long as this bottom. If you look at that as like, that's a bottom, just examine this in comparison. It's hugely different in timing. So I'm most interested at this point, and I guess finding if I've done this triangulation right, that and you know what I mean? Like, this could be more regular, like a buy up like that, just above, and still get there in the same place. This is definitely a low possible option, where it drops the wave and then returns in like a slingshot. That would be massive, 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 massive potential. That would be the biggest move we ever experienced, for sure. The rest of these are debatable in terms of like how long it takes. I don't really know. But I'm curious now, that intersection of these dates, and then it depends on whether you think this is the top where it breaks down, where this is the top, just where that wick is. It's a whole lot of question marks. I'm curious about this value. This particular one would have to be seen throughout in order to be really, oh, taken seriously. It should be mirrored as far as diamond structures go. Okay, well. Yeah, I think we may be onto something there. These parallels look really nice for resistance and then support and then failure here. This is a whip around. This reminds me of that father of all charts thing I did a long time ago. It's a very similar concept, except I did that like, well, no, I did it ascending. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, it's like the same value as like what we're doing right now. It's like that same angle here. This is just estimation because I don't have any, I don't have enough data yet to do it, but it's not actually that far-fetched when you look at the big picture of movement. But to be fair, there's really nothing to say that you couldn't, I don't know, distribute and come back. It's just kind of like looking at it just on the big picture, wondering if it makes any sense. I mean, I've found high targets before that were fine, you know. I don't think that it necessarily has to be the way that we think it has to be, you know, with these kinds of things. We're just kind of looking at it. Yeah, I mean, so there's an argument to be made about this as a widening. And maybe that just simply is just like a midpoint whip around, like a giant S-curve. Because I think these are adding up to be about the same as this lower value. So like the additional ones don't look that different. They're kind of just adding up to be the same value. So it's sort of like saying like this could have like a 50-50 swing around, which we already sort of do. And that's interesting, but it's not really a new thing. And then, of course, if this were to happen, this would be a massive, like, wedge. Price target of 110, which again is like, that's back to the original height of the stock. That's like the original value of the stock at 110. So I'll have to look at this and based on distribution and see what I can see. It may also be good to do a comparison to a bottom. Since this is going down, we're kind of making a big assumption here that this is actually iterating. I know you might think that it's a guarantee, but I don't know. You know, maybe it is, and if it does, then I think that you could count them like 1, 2, and then 3. But that's not a given. So, for example, like if this crossed low, you know, and then started going up again, it would be just like a new, there might be an iteration there, but it'd be just like a new version of the same thing. I think this is a very curious number to me. There may be another reason for that, so I don't want to get too like excited about that. This is a really curious number to me though. And then that 110 value is also really curious if it continued to break down in like a wedge. I find that to be kind of interesting as well. Because those are the 67 to like 100. That's about where I sort of felt like we were probably going to land eventually around that February time. We might see it break above the trend a little bit. Something like 1400 or 1100 or whatever. Those are values that seem kind of ridiculous to me. So it really is just a matter of where do you think that you should draw that line. And it's possible I'm putting it in the wrong place. You know, that's another thing that I'm trying to not to do that, but it's possible I'm just getting it way off. Because maybe it's not from this bottom to this anchor here at 236. I think it is, but it could be like slightly lower. It could be like right here instead, which obviously changes some things. Nevertheless, fun little experiment for sure. Just tried it out. That's interesting. All right, but here's the thing. If this went low, I would actually maybe consider a bigger move, because if you take it down, you haven't crossed this creek yet. You're building out like a pressure. You know, it's like, it's a very different chart. And if you jump early, like let's say you jumped in November of this year, it's just very different. If this comes down into November and then breaks out in like a rally, market rally, as opposed to going low, it's just a really different chart, you know? Suddenly it's got a lot more ups and down swings. But if it comes low and it's more like, I don't know, not horizontal, but you know, you could have a possibility of more of a climb out, which we haven't really seen yet, and I think it would look pretty different. But it would be like a climb across this middle. But if it waits a long time for a breakout, in theory, that makes me more bullish in terms of like a big move. Like I could see more readily like a massive breakout happening. It's a little different than some of the stuff that I've seen from folks where it just kind of goes straight up, and I'm like, yeah, but that basically is just like you making a line that just looks like this because you just want to go, and it doesn't really make sense if you don't have sideways action. But if you have this really long build out with an extreme downward pressure, I think it's very possible. And that's why I want to look at this guy here and this guy here, because these are more readily, I guess, are easier to compare to the, yeah, I think they're easier to compare to this overall big picture, because it's a similar kind of breakdown and push up, and it really goes into like a distributive mode. I mean, essentially it's like distribution, long-term distribution. And it suggests that you distribute above maybe distribution, but it would suggest that you're distributing above probably this value, 234, like at the most. What is that value right there? What's that 234 to on that February date or March date? It's freaking weird. That's really weird. It's really similar percentage-wise. All right, so in theory, it's kind of like making a big like UTAD, like an up thrust after distribution, and you would be doing it probably above 68 here. So I think this would be a distribution from 68 to 105, maybe higher, but it'd be like in this pocket right here. And that's kind of interesting, because I think that yeah, I mean, it's the same thing we've talked about before. It just sort of implies that you don't get past this whip around, like it doesn't advance. So at the end of the day, it's sort of like the feeling of confirmation here is definitely good. I'm a little nervous about a major continuation of downside. It's a really interesting idea, though, because now I'm starting to think about it a little differently. Like, if you're adding up values and it works, and apparently it works. I mean, it's strange, but if you're adding up values long term, those values work to a point, and then you kind of lose it because there's no valuation. I mean, I think it's got enough built up that we don't need to necessarily have like a billion. You know what I mean? Like, we don't necessarily have to have some kind of a massive build out here. Like, I think it could be as simple as, November comes around, AMC does cross right here, and then it advances and you see that move. But in theory, like, if this is the first M shape, you should have a break below that trend, which is most typical. So you would not expect it to just continue to advance unless it dips below here. Gosh, that's perfect. Ugh, gross. So you kind of would expect it to go. It's gross. It's gross, guys. This is the November rally kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, you might expect it to come up, and it's going to be like a tough spot to argue about, as it'll definitely look bullish. And you're just going to have to wait and see what happens here. I don't know. But I wouldn't necessarily expect the M to cross until it breaks down, is what I was trying to say. Like, however this happens, I would not necessarily expect it to run before before a legit breakdown. It'd probably end up being more like a classic cat ear. And there's reasons for that, but a lot of it has to do with the middle. The middle iterates down. It just does, and it ends up being like the most difficult to read one and the most severe one. And this ends up being probably the breakdown level. So we actually may have enough information. I think it's really close. We may have enough information here to... What? Get out of Dodge. Retesting the 1330 of May 14th. What? May. Oh, yeah, we'll go back. I think we're going to go back up. Then I think it's going to be problematic. I think we're going to have some chop. I don't know exactly how this is going to work, but I imagine November election, we get like a rally. And that's probably when we see some kind of a wave out. And then it's going to be like a distribution or accumulation then going into the end of the year. So you'll go sideways. So you'll get like a little pop. It's beautiful as a top. I mean, I hate to be like that. It's kind of gross, but it's a really simple to read intersection. And then, yeah. Basically, from that point, it's just what happens next. I don't really know. It does seem about right. It could be underneath it then. It could be above it, but whatever. Same difference to me. It's like, makes no difference. It's in this pocket somewhere. I would say it's probably going to go down to like 6 or something at that point and do the LSPY. I'm curious about the rest of it because I'm wondering if I kind of have it setting up really low, but I'm actually wondering if what we see instead is that this build out, this little tiny one, is actually underneath the... It's like the next one up is actually not on the low, but it's how you get to the final like low. So it stays high and then it comes below here. And instead of actually making a new low, it just goes... It really doesn't matter. This would be like, it looks completely dead for like half a year. But this is where it makes like a new low, and then it's a buy up spring. So it's actual spring. So this creates a phase B bottom. So this is a auto reaction phase B top. Then it creates a phase B bottom, then a spring, and then the spring finally jumps the creek. And it's just iteration. I literally just drew the iteration that we just experienced, but I drew it low, and it works as a bottom because it just does. And I don't know how low we go, but it's got to be beneath 242. Yep. Auto reaction to retest preliminary supply. Phase B top comes above the first auto reaction. Long downtrend, long sell off, new low, new bottom, phase B, drops right beneath where this is. It's got to take off from that point later. Builds out a long-term like spring, so this could be where it finally makes like a fake advancement. It'd probably be really high or something and come back up to like almost $6. Reconfirms that that's the creek advancement. So this has like a secondary creek cross here. This would jump over this guy. That's where your creek is defined. So this will accelerate downwards because it'd have to be like a steeper drop, and it would be. And then, yeah, so just like we have here, this creek, remember, we've got from this peak to this peak. You'd have another one from this peak to this peak, from here to here. And that would be steeper because it's a downward iteration. And so you'd have to have that. And then you'd have it steeper, and that's where it's going to give you your bigger spring. This goes way past it. It goes to fill that gap. And this is where the nastiest of the drops will be, probably March of 2025. I don't know what's going to happen in that time frame, but it would be like there would be something, right? Some kind of something. Dilution, you name it. I don't know. Something happens in March 2025. This thing breaks down. It goes into like its final little push down. Then it iterates again. So this is like a new iteration of the same thing. But it's really just a part of it. Iterations are not separate entities. They're part of the same thing. And that's where it starts looking a little bit like this kind of double up thrust. This is the same thing. Auto reaction, phase B. New support, spring, go. Yep. And then this also kind of aligns with that pretty well. It's ugly as all get out. And I would love to see it not go lower, but that would be a major change of behavior for the stock. And I can't predict that. So that's just a matter of like whether you think it's going to stay high or not is just a matter of opinion. It could. There's no guarantee this has to come down to a new low. Like this could end up being like up here and all the same. You have the same concepts. It's no different. It's just whether or not it's a spring or not, I can't tell. There's two different schematics for Wyckoff. One's a spring, one's not a spring. You know, like it really makes no difference. So, you know, draw it however you want to draw it. Maybe it doesn't ever make a new low here. It stays high. It just fills the gap, and then the auto reaction here changes character. And this time it doesn't go down low. But I will say this. It seems to me that no matter what happens, you probably don't take off completely until this test here at $3 in December of 2025. You guys are like, what? Are you serious, Booksy? Yep. I know that there's other things that can happen. I'm not saying there's nothing else that can happen. But that's where it intersects, the apparent triangulation of all this junk. So I feel like it's going to be pretty close to right. This would be the big buy-in here. This would be your main buy-in. So it would be months long from August, September, October. This is the big like spring buy-in down here. And that's the time period where your smart money is like, we're going to take it back up. Because they've done the liquidity test, it's not going to go lower. It's time to mark it up. You're going to come back above the phase B top. Phase B top's at $12. So now you're in the phase B top. You're going to mark it up. We're done here. We've traded low for a long time, years. So we've got a huge amount of X's on the chart for P and F, point and figure. Yeah. Then you can buy it up and go. You should just go right into an SOS area near the top. I mean, I've kind of got it off to the side here. There's other things that would happen, but it'd be like there or something. And then you basically go through it, go through the motions. That's gross. What I was commenting on before, the reason I made a big exclamation mark, what? Are you serious? Is because of this. This is very, very unusual. These are macro intersections. These are not like little bitty guys. And this is definitely like 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe 5 counting the upward target. So that's a lot of data going into that point. That's a lot of information. That's a lot of trajectories. That's a lot of just consideration into that target. It's pretty unusual. In addition to that, remember those parallels we were drawing? That's this red guy. I mean, that might as well be right on the money too. It's essentially like right there. So I think this is what's going to happen. And it's going to be crazy, but I think this is what we're going to see going into that year, I guess. 2026 is going to be huge, potentially. Huge, huge, huge. And I don't think it's over. I think that the interesting thing about this is that move just gets you to the previous level here. I'm really curious about this one. I'm very, very, very curious about this one measuring out to 12 because I'm trying to like figure out like what that value is relationship to this chart. Like, why is that important? It's almost that middle point value. You guys are like, what, Bugsy? Shut up, dude. I was like, why is this value here? What does this even mean? Stupid chart. It's the reactive value from this move backwards. Unreal. That's just dumb. So what you're saying, Booksy, is nothing, I guess. I guess you could just assume it's going to be like a rotational thing if you wanted to, but that value is strangely exact. It's like an exact whip around of those middle lines that we were drawing earlier, these guys. It's the squishy middle. Man, that makes sense in some ways. It doesn't make sense in other ways. Because then you're like, well, doesn't that mean you're just going to keep going up? And like, I guess it could if you think it's going to like rotate. I don't know. I guess if you thought it was going to keep going up, you'd expect it to do like this. This is probably where a lot of those other people are because they're saying like $20. And I wonder if they're looking for something like this, like a massive jump. And then it would go back to creek test. And then it would pump all the way up. So this is like a rotational version of the same thing. So they're expecting it to jump the creek. I'm not expecting it to jump the creek. So there's a massive rotation here. It's the same thing. It may look like I'm doing something like really arbitrary, but I'm looking at this in reverse, basically. Basically, you know. Yeah, so that would be like a massive buy-in that then drops down really hard, and then this is kind of like a, probably like somebody talking about like November rallies or something. And then instead of doing what we think here, it's like a giant double top. Like that. All right. Hang on just a second. I got to wrap this up. Coming. Yeah, all right. Well, I mean, I'm happy for people that have that $20 target. I don't. That's not where I think we're gonna go because I'm not being bearish, but I'm trying to be as realistic as possible. And one of these iterates down, the other doesn't. So if it iterates down, it's not gonna go to 20. It's only gonna go to like 15, maybe 1475, then 1380, and then it'll iterate again. The rest of it is speculative based on like a really bullish outcome. It's not impossible. It's just, in my opinion, like it's a speculative outcome. So you have to kind of take it for what it is, I guess. I see it. I can see the rotational symmetry playing out. I just wonder if it's not rotational, it's iterative, and that means that it's going to do it again here and then again here and take it back to the low. And then they're going to do it like a normal buy-in, and it's going to go back to the top. See, this is kind of the way I had it the first time, was you maybe push out mid-year or early next year and then come up, and maybe next summer you get like a high around 40, maybe around here, and then drive the price back up again. This is more of a regular buy-in for AMC on this kind of a markup, so that's not impossible. So that would make sense to me. Also, it's not impossible. I had my first chart that I had ever on the big picture was a little more like this. It's kind of in between these two. It was sort of like push, push, retreat, push, push. Like, so just double up, double up. And that's what I had earlier today too. So yeah, I mean, I get it. I get the $20 target. Part of me thinks they're not going to give it to us. I don't know. I get the feeling like this seems more likely to me. But short term, this is neither here nor there, so we got time. Maybe. I don't know. I think that it just depends on how you think we jump these creeks, you know. I have a strong suspicion that this might be the way they go. Because you can spend a lot more time. It's less of a markup that's just kind of regular where it's buy up, sell off, buy up, sell off, buy up, sell off. But it's much more controlled, I guess. Yeah, I mean, if you rotate this around, that's what it looks like, basically. So it's just this guy flipped on its head. As again, it's not impossible. I don't know about that, man. You know, like, if you're the top dog in this, there's reasons why you did what you did. If I wanted to, I mean, if it's me, I'm just going to keep it down low as long as possible. Like, I'm going to keep it below 12 for like a year. I think a year is a long time. You think a year about it, you think that's like, oh, it's a long, long time, you know? It is a long time, but you got to remember, like, this COVID drop, which built up this big run, was like 10 months. I mean, it was a long time of sideways and down. We've really been going down for a while, so it feels long, right? It feels long-winded. I do think a lot was accumulated here, but on the way down. But it would not surprise me at all if a lot of that was just to kind of build out a function for going sideways for another year and really doing the work of long-term accumulation. They only have 30 million shares here. And I mean, they had like 60 million up here. So it goes to show, like, I would not be surprised if they had like a huge, you know, portion of ownership. And they're probably going to sell a bunch too on this run up. I just think this is a long game. And I could definitely see it being like a 1-2 sell down and then 1-2. Maybe we don't see maybe we don't see the low. That's a possibility. We could end up again with an LPS here instead and stay at like 4 or 5. That's possible. So that would just kind of raise this up a bit, and then you still see the same motion of like that. You'd still have to see the same motion of like that 1-2. So yeah, but that's the mark. I mean, that's like a markdown. Now we've been in the period from September, and we haven't finished it yet. We haven't even finished a year yet. It started in September 2023. This is where the actual like real trading started. This was just selling, and that big drop, and they did sell. It's not just because of the reverse split. They dropped those 50 some odd million shares during this time. They had them up here by September 11th. They didn't have them anymore. Yeah, but this is what happened last time too. It hit all-time lows, and I'm sure people saw this and they thought it was going to continue to advance, and the market did. So I'm not trying to make it like, oh, it has to be the same way. It doesn't have to be the same way. But the market was advancing here, dude. Like right here, this was about halfway through this structure. And SPY began advancing again, and AMC went low and started iterating. So like, if we come to this point in November and we don't go with the market and the market's running and we start going down and iterating, I'm going to look back at this and just say it's the same thing that happened over here when the market rallied after COVID. If the market rallies after elections and it's running, there's no reason to think that AMC has to go with it. It just doesn't. It could definitely come back down again. So I'm not disagreeing. I mean, if we came above 12 and held support, I'd be like, okay, let's go. But I'm not going to count my chickens until they hatch here. I don't think it's wise. I think that there's a strong probability that this could continue to iterate down again to attempt to achieve new lows. And it almost makes more sense in some ways. I know folks are looking at this volume and they're thinking like, once you unleash it again, you can't. But that's the thing is like, this volume is crazy. It is. They managed to drive it back down for 3 months pretty well. Happy to be wrong here. I'm happy to see a markup, but I still don't imagine it would happen till later. So I'm just going to look at it as I'm looking at it and leave it at that. None of this really matters till we get to 12. So let's just work one step at a time anyways. Yeah, it's coming back down locally. Now you have all these boxes drawn, so you can't see anything on your chart anymore. Wonderful. I don't know if you missed it, Reese, but we're doing something pretty cool. Found something really good today that works really well. Every time people think there's a shortcut, man, it does not work. I'm just saying. This idea of it fast forwarding and just going is a great idea. I think it's going to come back down. I know I've been very like bullish about the opportunity to jump that creek early and just go, but I know that's kind of weird, but I kind of just convinced myself. I was like, okay, thanks, Booksy. I thought it was going to come back. I thought it was going to go to here and then chop back down to like 5s and 6s. We're on the same page there for the most part, but I think that now that I'm looking at it like big picture, I'm like, the Vanguard in me says that they're going to take it back down. No, I think it's going to run next week, Avila. I don't know that for, I can't, no one can give you like bulletproof, here's what's going to happen, but I think it's finished. I think we're doing our final iteration right now into tomorrow. It's going to be finished. It's going to start going. You can't just sit here forever. Like, it just can't. This is like finished. This iteration is absolutely, in my opinion, done at 1400 tomorrow. It's 2 hours before close. So the final 2 hours of the day tomorrow will be kind of interesting. If it starts dumping really bad, we're going to be sweating in our boots, but I think it'll be really positive. I think we're going to see it jump the first couple of little creeks, and then Monday we'll jump the next ones and just start a big run up. Well, yeah, I shouldn't say it can't. Anything can happen. I guess what I'm saying is if this operator knows what they're doing and they don't get anything unexpected, then they're going to do it at that time. That's me assuming that I'm in tune with the operator on this one. There's no other pathway, through iteration. I mean, like when you get to that point in the chart, it's kind of like, I would say it's easier to measure, and it becomes very maybe obvious to me that that's where it's going to be. So I'm not saying that they can't delay something. I'm just saying that the operation is done. Like the range is satisfied. At least according to what they've been doing. Avila Spectrum, nobody can tell you with absolute certainty if you're safe or done for. What I can say is that on my chart, this ends Friday, which means it should start moving outward. Not a lot, not at first, unless we're just gapping up tomorrow. We'll see. It should be moving out towards that 562 very quickly after that. But it probably will be Monday if it does it. So August 16th is a week away, right? So if you've got weeklies for August 16th and it moves Monday up to 562, you're not done for. I just can't promise you that. If you're looking for somebody to give you comfort, take comfort in what I just said, because that's what I think is going to happen. But I can't tell you that you're going to make a bunch of money when I don't know. Yeah, like what title this guy is saying. You got to hope that the IV pumps and doesn't just sit there, that the stock doesn't just sit there. Because even if we got to 562, if it just sits there for a week, you're not going to make money on those calls. So that's all. It is a close call. I also have some mid-August GME. So I'm looking in the same boat, you know, in terms of like those expiries and where we might be at that time. I'm pretty hopeful that we see something really big here next week. And the same for AMC. I don't know if we're going to have some kind of news or some kind of catalyst to go with it, or if it's just a technical breakout. I understand. I feel you, man. It's or lady, whatever you are. I feel you. All right, I gotta go. My kiddo's home. I'm gonna go hang out with him, get dinner ready. So you guys have a good day. I'll talk to you tomorrow.